Hey everyone, thank you for joining Dave and I for episode 2 of our new show, Tales of Valor, where we retell the stories of those who have risen to the occasion in extraordinary and courageous ways in the face of danger or seemingly insurmountable odds, especially in battle. One such person, another Medal of Honor recipient, is William H. Carney, who is so passionate about the importance of the flag, he risked his life for one. We want you to feel like you're around the fire hearing this story with us, and remember that we're just being our normal selves, and no disrespect is ever intended to the heroes of our stories or those that love them. And with that, we encourage you to pour a drink and listen in. And we are back
again. Yes, we have a
guess who's back.
A full disclosure, full admittance,
full disclosure, full. I mean, we really don't have anything to apologize for, really.
Except, well,
I wish there was a way that we could make this like a lost episode, for later. But
yeah.
But so guys, I guess this will be episode 2. And as you know from the premise that we gave you in episode 1, the idea is that we're going to tell these tales of valor, and we were going to take turns basically telling each other the stories that we sort of researched, beginning with these Medal of Honor recipients. And so Dave told the first story, and I was tasked with telling the second story. And I did my research, was ready to tell the story, and Dave had a backup story in case I wasn't ready. He had a backup. Well, when we started recording, it turns out that we had picked out of how many Medal of Honor recipients are there?
3,523 now, but there was 3,522 when we actually recorded this first time.
Then, there you go. So
that tells you that's how far behind we are.
You guys that graduated like AP Calc, you can tell us what the percentage is, I guess, of the odds that out of those Medal of Honor recipients, I would pick the same exact person that Dave would pick. So that was already interesting enough for episode 2, and we recorded that. But as it turns out, technology, while it simplifies our life in so many ways, is also not
perfect,
fully reliable. And so I had an SD card that the audio file was on that I'd been transporting back and forth to my office and recording other stuff on. I don't empty it every time. And the SD card just happened to go bad. Literally, I put it in to record a video one night, and it just said, no SD card found in the recorder. And I was like, what the heck? So the whole thing just like went bad. So we lost the episode. So rather than fake our way through this, then we'll just retell the story together.
And we're just, we're coming out and just letting you know that's what happened. But this story is worth telling twice. But I have
this story still angers me. It still angers me. I'm still mad.
That's right.
I'm still mad. Well, I am livid. I am.
You're up in arms about this.
I am buttressed against the enemy of Hollywood.
But before you get into that, let me just I got to tell the audience here that there is a darn good chance that I or possibly you are going to somehow subconsciously refer to our first podcast when we first did this podcast in ways like, well, the last time we talked about and then ... So hopefully we don't.
Or
do
you might
that.
hear like like we said before.
Yes. So ... So I'm hoping that you guys will still, because again, this story is well worth telling twice.
Yes,
so,
but our truth here is out on Front Street that we're coming back to the story, and it was the episode. It was our planned episode number 2.
Yes.
It's really our 5th episode that we're recording now.
Yes.
6th, really, if you count this twice.
Yeah.
But you will hear it as number 2. Unless, of course, you just listen out of order.
Yeah, which is fine because you can.
Which is your prerogative.
That's kind of the beauty of this podcast is you can listen to it in any order that you choose. You could listen to one podcast 1,000 times if it's that good.
Here at Tales of Valor, we give you the tools to be your own boss. It's kind of like Enterprise Rent a Car and Step Brothers, you know.
So, yeah. Well, that's like I said. This is
the Catalina wine mixer.
So tell me, tell the audience why you are so livid and up in arms about this, because this is a special story. So
this is a special story, and I want to give credit where credit is due. It was crazy that we had sort of brainstormed a little bit this idea of the podcast, and I happened to be listening to Mike Rowe the way I heard it. And if you guys have never listened to his podcast, I mean, it's phenomenal. Of course it is. It's Mike Rowe, and he's the best of the best. But this is like a micro podcast, right? They're usually about 10 minutes, and he just tells this story, and he always waits till the end to reveal who it is. And I was shocked when at the end, because I was listening to this, and I'm like, man, this sounds like a great tale of valor. Like, I wonder who this is. And then at the end, it's kind of like, oh, this guy's the first Black Medal of Honor recipient. And crazy enough to come from the Civil War era, when you would think that they would be hesitant to maybe give that out to someone who is of color.
Yeah, and we are going to talk a little bit about that. And his name is Mike
William Carney. H. Carney. William H. Carney. Am I correct? Right?
Yep. And I seriously now I'm geeked again to tell the story again.
I'm pumped again. So I while I was like trying to figure out, well, who am I going to get here? Because I was thinking, okay, I'm going to jump to like Vietnam era and see what stories are there, or jump around. But I became instantly drawn to this after hearing Mike Rowe tell his version of the story, as it were. And then I went to the internet and I saw these pictures, and I was like, oh wow, this is really a cool story. But what angers me, what really grinds my gears, is the fact that this scenario, the very situation that William Carney found himself in, that he would ultimately become a Medal of Honor recipient for, was depicted in the movie Glory, which, up until this moment of research, I would have thought, man, Glory is a great movie. And if I'm being honest, as a film, yes, I still love the movie Glory. But they took William Carney out of the movie.
Are you sure they didn't just like hide him in the background, Mike, someplace?
I am positive. They used another character who shall remain nameless, who is written into the story, to do William Carney's work and take all the freaking credit.
Isn't that ridiculous?
Why, and why again? It's the holy trinity of whys, Dave. I have questions. I need answers. Why would you write out a story that is this amazing with why not just let it be that person? Why can't you give a nod to the dying here? Like, it's so frustrating, especially once you read the story. Now, I get it. I guess Hollywood can't get it right, like perfect. Like, well, we only have so much time to develop so many characters, and the audience is attached to this character, so we are giving a nod to William Carney by having his actions still depicted, that kind of a thing. But why not let him have a role?
But
why not make the role named William Carney?
Well, exactly. Well, I guess my gripe here is that, yes, I did enjoy the movie Glory. Matter of fact, it was on a couple months ago, and I every time it comes on, you have to watch it. But for some reason, Hollywood must have thought that it took away from the story of the 54th Massachusetts. But it just didn't. If anything, it was an example of the exemplary, the bravery of these guys when they. Oh my gosh, he would have been a perfect addition, because he helped make this what it was. He
right.
helped institute blacks fighting in the Civil War, being able to actually combat in the Civil War. He was, in my opinion, with his unit, integral in this. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later, is how important this merry band of men actually was and how important they were to the war effort. So,
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is that the reason that William Carney is considered the first black recipient of the Medal of Honor is because his actions, even though I think others got their medals before him,
yeah,
that his actions predated the other actions that were awarded.
yes.
So he still carries with him that the honor that he's the first black Medal of Honor recipient, which man, if you're his family, how proud do you have to be of William Carney, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And when, if you don't mind, I'd like to start out with a little bit of kind of some of the important things regarding the Civil War, and at some point when we start talking about more of these brave individuals, I have a feeling a lot of these people are going to be from the Civil War as well, because as we talked about before, just under half of all Medal of Honor recipients are from the Civil War. So there's going to be,
my goodness, man, so many freaking people sacrificed their lives or died in that war. Oh my gosh, man.
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
it's ridiculous.
So as we talked about that in the first podcast, there's some things that I wanted to bring out so that people kind of have an idea. So we set this base, this foundation regarding the Civil War and certain things that were happening there, certain things that were very important in regards to the soldiers and the units. And one of them is the battle flags. Right,
Mm-hmm.
because this is going to become very important for this story, and I got a little piece from an article by Robert McNamara. It's titled "Why Were Flags So Important in the Civil War?" And I'm going to read a little bit from that, if that's okay. So it says the Civil War soldiers placed great importance on the flag, okay, of their regiments. That men would literally sacrifice their lives to defend this regimental flag. Now, I know we kind of think, oh, that's a little bit silly today, but if you understood why the flags, these regimental flags, meant so much, there was actually several reasons for it. First of all, it was a case of morale, right? Because this morale, as long as these flags were flying, these units were still in the battle. They were still in the fight. And so this was a huge morale booster. As a matter of fact, a lot of these flags, once they would, when a battle was won or an important thing happened, it wasn't uncommon for them to actually embroider the names of the battles or whatever that they were involved in. Like I said, it was a matter of great importance for them. But there's other more practical purposes for these flags, and some of them, one of them, which is hugely important, is it marked the position of the regiment on the battlefield. Now, this, if you think about how confusing a battlefield could be, especially back then, because I don't think there was anything that shot powderless ammo back then. So imagine an entire battlefield where there is nothing but smoke, chaos, fire, and confusion, and that's why the flag was so important, because that was a rallying point. So it was a huge deal. So just tactically, having the flag being able to mark the position of the regiment was a fantastic, and that was a morale booster too. So if you lost your way, you'd be able to see your flag, and you'd be able to rally around it. So that was hugely important. Now, obviously, we don't need that as much nowadays. We have radio communications, all that, but they didn't have that stuff back then, you know.
Yeah.
So they didn't have the electronic means of communication. So, so that would actually be pretty interesting to kind of figure that out now, right? But so being a color bearer,
If they had like walkie-talkies, I'd be on the walkie-talkie if I was at the Civil War. Like, hey, any of you guys want to like not stand in this line?
yeah.
Maybe we should.
Does this seem pointless?
Anybody want to regroup and think through our tactics, because
Shut
I
up,
think
Carl.
we could maybe
Get
come
back in
up with
line.
something better than this. Like, their cannons are pointed right at us, and we should probably not walk at them. We could go around the side, maybe. Anybody?
Damn it, Carl.
We fight with honor, Carl.
yeah, we fight with honor. We don't fight at all.
Honor doesn't get me back home to Miles Cornbread.
Well, so it wasn't even just normally one color bearer either. A lot of times they had two, because one carried the U.S. flag,
Right.
or the Confederate flag at the time, and the other one would carry the regimental flag. So often there was two soldiers assigned to carrying the colors. It was a huge honor to be able to carry the flag. It required obviously an extraordinary bravery, because it was, I believe we when we walked over that part, it was as a drummer boy and a flag bearer, you were, they say 35% more likely to be killed on the battlefield than anybody else.
You would think with all their honorable ways of standing in lines and walking at each other that you would just leave those guys alone.
Well, but
because of the strategic reasoning behind it, like you already mentioned, why not take them out? It would disorient and make winning the battle more difficult for your opponent.
Yeah. So that can you just imagine that? Again, it's very hard to understand culturally in the military back then what an honor that was, because now we'd look at it and go, "You freaking kidding me? You want me to do what with this flag? Oh, put down my arms? Oh, that makes perfect sense to me." So, just even another thing, part of that. So, if you were to lose that flag, it was considered a disgrace. And so, as we talk about with a couple other, I know one in particular, another Medal of Honor recipient, capturing that flag was hugely important. And again, it caused a lot of disarray on the battlefield. So again, these things were super important. They were cherished. They were like, it was like they were trophies, So big. It was a big deal. So flags, super important. That's going to become kind of integral in this crazy story that we're going to discuss.
Right.
If you don't mind, I want to talk about the guns real quick. So I think very often we think about the Civil War having like smoothbore rifles and muskets, so you shoot. And that wasn't a totally uncommon thing. But I think a lot of people, in fact, it actually surprised me, was that the most common rifled musket was an actually rifle barrel musket. It was a Springfield model 1861. It had a rifled barrel. These things could reach out to like 300 up to 500 yards accurately, shooting a 58 caliber round.
Wow.
Now, I don't know about you, Mike, but I don't want to be hit with a 22 caliber, much less a 58 caliber round. It's ridiculous to even.
I did it on a dare once. I mean, it wasn't. Do I want to do it again? No, but
yeah, but you were wearing cotton, so it wasn't nearly as bad when you got hit, right? And these barrels.
Well, yeah, it was like all pillows. I just strapped pillows around myself.
Just duct tape pillows around you. But the barrels were 40 inches long. Now, the reason these barrels were so long, which also made them accurate, but the reason they were so long is because they would literally stand in these ridiculous lines. And so it was so that the second row, the subsequent rows wouldn't shoot their fellow soldiers that were in front of them. So these barrels extended past the line of soldiers. So they weighed 9 pounds. I mean, it's ridiculous. First of all, these things are just ridiculous. A 9-pound rifle is gonna take its toll on you. But then there's the second most common rifle was an Enfield pattern 1853 rifle musket. And it was a muzzle loading rifled musket as well. So these weapons were not inaccurate. They were extremely accurate. And again, I think that surprised me because I didn't realize. I thought that the Civil War was a little bit more chaotic regarding the accuracy. But it turns out, these freaking guys could shoot, and they could shoot a long ass way.
Like reloading forever and basically taking a shot like directly at somebody and it hits a tree like 500 feet away or something like that. Like, what just happened?
I seriously, I thought that. So I wanted to talk about the flag and I wanted to talk about the guns because again, this is going to kind of take place. So I don't know if you want to start it off, Mike, or I was just thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about his as a child and all that because you do a good job with that. So.
Well, let's let's start, I guess, at the end. Um, everybody
Ooh.
yeah, let's everybody celebrate. Everybody celebrated Carney in that moment, and essentially, let's start. Let's do a little Tarantino work here. Let's start with the end scene. Like the final scene has Carney carrying back. Now he's wounded. He's been struck in battle, and he carries back these colors, and ultimately he never lost possession of the flag. Now he wasn't intended to be a flag bearer, but he ended up grabbing the flag as the flag bearer fell, and he takes it and he brings it back to the safety behind the Union Army's lines, and everybody is essentially cheering him on. And despite all of that, his words are quoted as saying, "Boys, I only did my duty. The old flag never touched the ground." That was like that was it. That's how he handled, you know, his claim to fame was that. That was the statement. And I think that summarizes, like, as we'll see, this summarizes his, I think, approach to life. Like, this was my duty. It never touched the ground. Like, this is what I feel like when I read that what Carney is saying through those words is like, this is what I was meant to do. Like, this is why I was here.
Right.
Like, and this battle for the 54th Regiment, a black regiment, Colonel Shaw had been put in charge of this regiment, and the whole point was to show that black soldiers could fight, to really prove themselves on the battleground. That was the experiment that was the 54th Regiment out of Massachusetts. So these guys, man, they erupted. It was like they were inspired and moved, and it was a catalyst to continue to push forward in the battle for them.
For sure.
So that's the end victory scene. Now that's not the end of Carney's life. We'll get to that, but that's the sort of like the end culmination of the events that led him to earn the Medal of Honor. Now, the crazy thing is this was in 1863, I believe. Am I right on that, Dave?
Yes.
Yes, I think I'm right. So he was born in 1840. So again, 23 years old. What are most 23-year-olds doing today? I don't know. But
Drinking
there's
macchiatos at Starbucks.
Yeah, like no foam, light whip, upside down caramel macchiatos. I don't know what they're doing, but a lot of them are not really concerned about the flag. And I will mention this is another. I didn't connect these dots, but this was his picture, this iconic picture of
Love
William
this
Carney
picture.
holding this flag, and that the flag that he carried is still available to visit today in Boston, I believe.
Really?
And I was so bummed out. I actually went to Boston a couple of weeks ago, and my trip was so tight. I literally was getting the message to check in for my next flight as my first one was landing. So it was very, very fast, and I had a stacked trip, and I wasn't able to go, but they definitely have the flag on display, and I would love to just see it.
Do you have any idea what is it at a museum? Do you have any idea where it's
let's
at?
well, I can look it up. Why don't you look it up while I keep going? But the story is timely because, well, maybe not a little bit. It was more so each football season this comes up, right? The stand or kneel for the national anthem kind of a thing, the flag and all that debate that rages on. And the picture of William Carney was making its way around before, because in that picture he's holding the flag. He suffered injuries at great risk to himself to carry that flag and to bear that flag through battle and get it back safely to where it needed to be, and to inspire that first. Well, it wasn't the first, because I believe there was one out of Kansas. Am I correct on that too? You're always a good fact checker for me, Dave. There was
yes, it was Kansas. Yes,
the 54th in Massachusetts wasn't the only like all black regiment. There was other ones. So
and we can actually talk a little bit about that too, because that will be very important. I'm trying to find where this flag is, and I'm not finding much luck because I'm dim-witted today.
You are dim-witted.
I can't help myself.
You freaking dimwit.
I feel like it. That's right. We'll look for it later. That's okay.
We'll look for it later. It's out there somewhere. So in the Colin Kaepernick debate and all that stuff, this meme was going around like this man's photo should be in the locker room of every NFL team or something like that, and you look back and you're like, man, how differently times,
yes,
in a time that was inarguably, like it's literally impossible to argue otherwise, was much more difficult for a person of color to exist at peace in society in 1863 than it is in 2018 or 19 or whatever year all this debate started raging about, racism and inequity in America and how it relates to whether or not, showing proper respect to the flag plays into that. It's just, I don't want to get political with it. I'm just pointing out a very poignant fact that's sort of like just sitting there on the desk that you kind of have to look at it. It's there.
Well, I think if you look even a little bit further into that, you almost can't help but get political here. And the reason is because I think it's important that people know that blacks were not allowed to join the military when the Civil War started. And I know that there's a lot of talk and there could be a lot of debate on why the North went to war and why the South went to war. And we won't have to discuss that here, but I want to discuss a little bit about blacks in the Civil War, because this is actually this is political, but it's very important. So there was a couple years where it was tough. It was tough battle. It's a tough fight. The white volunteers were kind of dwindling in numbers. So President Lincoln started reconsidering his position on black soldiers. So they actually created a couple things. So the Second Confiscation Militia Act of July 17th, 1862 was that first step towards enlisting African Americans into the Union Army, of course. It didn't like specifically say that blacks were going to fight, but it did authorize the president to say, hey, it's to employ as many persons of African descent as he may deem necessary and proper for the suppression of this rebellion, ... in such manner as he may judge best for the public welfare. And so there was in the end, a large contingent of African Americans served in the American Civil War. 186,097 black men joined the Union Army, 7,122 officers, and 178,975 enlisted soldiers. Approximately 20,000 black sailors served in the Union Navy and formed a large percentage of many ships' crews. Now, just because they had joined the military, they were allowed to join the Union Army. That did not mean that they were fighting, which is why 1863 was so important, because the 54th was, again, I think integral in showing that blacks had the quote moxie or the guts or the grit to fight, because plain and simple, white people did not think black people could fight. That's just how it was back then. And of course, we all know today how ridiculous that sounds. But black men came together and just kind of showed everybody, hey, this is what we got, right? And so that was hugely important. So and that is the political side of that. So even though, again, we had it's important to note, first of all, blacks were not allowed in the Civil War. It wasn't until, and even Abraham Lincoln believed that same thing, but it wasn't until there was all of a sudden dwindling, volunteers that he said, hey, let's give this a chance. And quite honestly, it's my personal belief that this is basically what turned the tide and started just kind of crushing and defeating, even though they were afraid that it was going to actually boost the morale of the Confederate soldiers to fight against blacks. I believe that it actually had a counter, that it was counter to that, and that it actually kind of deflated them, especially when they started losing to them. Probably nothing was more frustrating than that, because it was the turning of the war, as far as I'm concerned. I'm no expert, but man, it was to read that, and to read this story in particular, I don't know how it could not have been.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy, man. And that is, well, I mean, that's the world, even worse than 1863, the world, that he was born into in 1840 in Norfolk, Virginia, and he was born a slave.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So this was his life, and he escapes that slavery, believed to be through the help of the Underground Railroad, and ultimately his family would settle in Massachusetts, in New Bedford.
Well, what does that tell you,
in
though?
the 1850s?
Think about that, because his father, William Carney, worked. So he gets out. He gets to Virginia. He works hard enough to buy the freedom of the rest of his family. Now, does that tell you? Which is no wonder William Carney became the first African American Medal of Honor recipient. There's just, like I said, this story, man, it's something,
So he grows up. He's moving forward in his education, and he has this ambition to become a minister, but ultimately he decides that he feels that he could best serve by helping his country, and to do something to help work to free other slaves. He felt like his work for God would be best done by being in the military for the purpose of accomplishing something that would help eliminate slavery, would free others, which I thought that's why I say, like, that whole concept captures for me when he says, I just did my duty, that flag never touched the ground. It was just kind of like, I feel like the beginning of William Carney before he's ever in the military, and that moment is like, he's like, finally, I've done what I'm doing, what I'm supposed to do, and that I'm like living out my purpose in that. So he becomes a member of the 54th, all volunteer infantry, and there was already an assault on Fort Wagner in South Carolina that had failed, and now the 54th is tapped for the next assault on this, and Colonel Shaw he seems to be an inspiring individual, and his men are in some level inspired by his willingness to step up and serve himself. He is quoted as saying that he would step in. It says the general called out the bearer of national colors, and this is coming from battlefields.org, and grasped the flag and asked, if this man should fall, who will lift the flag and carry it on? After the briefest of pauses, Shaw stepped forward and, taking a cigar from between his teeth, responded, I will. and the colonel's pledge elicited what this other guy, I don't even know who this is, later described as the deafening cheers of this mighty host of men about to plunge themselves into the fiery vortex of hell. And this is where they're going to thunder along the beach in South Carolina, like this whole crazy, amazing scene. And what's crazy about this is there was about 1,500 black soldiers, and almost 300, 272, I believe, were either killed or injured,
right?
Or missing, presumed dead, at the time. So a massive level of casualties were taken, not only in that regiment, but in the broader group of the number of black soldiers that were fighting.
Yes. It says the 54 suffered 272 killed out of they're wounded or missing out of the 600. 54th brought in 600. And Colonel Shaw was among.
I think that 1,500 number is a broader number of black soldiers.
It's actually, it says the total Union casualties 1,515 out of 5,000 in the assault force.
Jeez.
So I know it's ridiculous. And the Confederates, 174 casualties out of 1,800 defenders. So this,
wow,
it gets ugly very quickly, right? I mean, this is okay.
Right.
What I thought was interesting, because when I saw the movie Glory, I didn't kind of get, like, why was there the ocean over to their left, right, as they were marching through. But as I started reading more about it, I'm like, oh, okay. So really, this was it was Fort Wagner. It was on Morris Island. It was it helped kind of guard the entrance to the harbor of Charleston. So that's why it was facing, right there at the ocean. So again, it was so confusing to me. I'm like, what? Where? Like, it seems like they're on this tropical island. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know what's going on now. So yeah.
Yes.
So Shaw and the 600 men of the 54th, they were going to spearhead that assault from this little strip of sand on that east side of the fort that faced the Atlantic
kind of like
Ocean.
Kind of like one way in. This isn't a not a lot of tactics involved, and they didn't have a Civil War SEALs yet, so there was no that William Carney didn't have like his face painted and night vision goggles creeping up out of the Atlantic
with a knife in between his teeth.
Of course, yeah, of course he did. He didn't have that. There was no pedal propelled helicopters to like it's like a Wright brothers version of the helicopter.
Silencers.
Yeah, none of that. Like he just had to march down the beach. And so Colonel Shaw steps forward, inspires these men, and it's amazing that as they approach the summit, Shaw falls and is killed as they reach the summit at the fort. And Carney sees this. And simultaneous to that, now listen, Carney has already been wounded in the head, in the leg, and in the hip. He's already been shot and is lying. He's lying in agony near Colonel Shaw, this man that had inspired all these troops and had led them, and he's lying there. Is he? I don't. What is going through his mind? Is he presuming this is where I die? Is this what he's thinking at this point? Like, I'm dying here with my colonel, and this is it.
Well, that's probably where I'd be. I mean, well, it's so weird that they were burrowed like into a sand dune. It's about 1,000 yards from the fort, right? So they're getting bombarded with artillery. It's night and day, right? And so by nightfall, these orders are passed down so that the 54th stands up and they start dressing ranks to attack in what they call 2 wings of 5 companies each. And that's when they started advancing and then become hit by these barrages of canister musketry, shells from the fort. And that's when, like you said, a bullet strikes, the 54th color sergeant and also Shaw. And so what does Carney do? He throws down his gun. That's the first thing I would do, Mike. I'd throw down my gun. It says,
according to military.com, he gathers his strength and he seizes the colors as he sees the soldier bearing the American flag begin to falter. So he's kind of like snapped back into the battle. I can imagine, like, I've been shot. You're dealing with that. You're seeing your colonel has now died at the top of the battlefield, and you're like, and you look, and all of a sudden he sees these colors begin to falter, and something inside him kicks in, and he grabs it, and it says, in less than 20 minutes, I found myself alone, struggling among the ramparts while the dead and wounded were all around me. I knew my position was a critical one, and I began to watch to see if I would be left alone. Confronted by a battalion of enemies, Carney wound the flag around its staff and held it aloft while running through a volley of Confederate grape shot. So he realized he was alone. Like, this was not a situation in which, hey, we just need to push forward a little bit more. He looked around and he's like, there is nothing but death and destruction around me, and it's me left with this flag. And he starts to make his way back in order to get it back to his regiment.
Well, it's dark too. It is dark as well. And then there's another account of that, because when you're describing him getting injured,
I remember there was something we went through before that he got hit again while he was running back.
Yeah,
right?
there's other account, and again, so we're retelling a story from different sources. So you'd have to bear with us and just kind of be in the story with us as this is happening, because like where I'm at, it's just like you said, Mike, he finds himself alone. So he gets up, he picks the colors up, and he runs, and he finds himself at the wall of the fort, and he is by himself. There is nobody else around. I'd have to say I would probably just start burying myself in the sand. Just to like hide or something.
Play dead.
Yeah.
Like, let's just lay here and
just
wait it out.
So he's alone. There's bodies of dead people, wounded comrades. They're all around him. He gathers himself and he's holding onto this flag. It boggles my mind. So keep in mind too that he is holding that flag, and people if there was anybody around, they know to muster around him. So he probably thinks help's coming. But man, think about how dark it is. It's not like, again, you're right. No, there's no night vision. So, unless they can see from the exploding artillery or something else as it kind of flashes and lights the sky amongst the smoke powder and all that, you may not see him. And he was alone, absolutely alone. So he's surveying the battlefield, and he notices another Union regiment has attacked his right. And they're kind of drawing away from that focal point of that resistance. And to his left, he sees a large force of soldiers advancing down the ramparts of the fort towards him. So he thinks they're Union forces, but by the flashes of the muskets,
they get pretty close.
He realizes, nope, these are Confederates coming at me. So he, like you said, he winds the colors around the flagpole. He makes his way to this low protective wall, moves along a ditch. He passes over the ditch, and he thought that it was going to be dry because it at one point was, but the tide must have come in, and now it's waist deep. So,
waist deep water.
Yeah,
that he's trying to, and he's injured. This is like, it's easy to forget that when you hear this guy running away and jumping into this big marsh, waist deep water, that he's been shot.
Yeah, so so he's surrounded by the wreckage of what's left of a regiment. He wants to help the wounded. He's pinned down. He's crouching in this water. So he figures his best chance is to head back to the Federal lines. He makes a break for it, right? So they say that it was his fateful move. So as he himself later writes, "The bullet I now carry in my body came whizzing like a mosquito, and I was shot. Not being prostrated by the shot, I continued my course, yet had not gone far before I was struck by a second shot." So remember, we were talking about the size caliber of the rounds that are more than likely being shot at him. These are hurting him. These are not little nicky things that, and so these things are, he's got 2 slugs in his body basically right now, and he keeps moving, right? He gets hit that second time. He sees another Union soldier coming in his direction, which I can only imagine how exciting that, like you're like, oh, like the relief, he gets within earshot. He hails him. They ask who he was. They kind of exchange that security, who goes there, whatever they do. Halt, who goes there? And the guy replies, that he's with the 100th New York, and he asks if Carney's wounded, and he says, "Yeah, I've been shot." And then he flinches because a third shot hits his arm, grazes his arm. So we're laughing because what does a graze from a .58 caliber round look like? I feel like it would tear a part of your whole tricep off, right? So I mean, come on.
Yeah, you think.
Yeah.
You'd think.
So this soldier comes to help him. Now, this soldier doesn't care if he's white or black. He just knows that he's a fellow soldier and he needs help. This guy runs, he moves there. He says, "Now then," he says, let me take the colors and carry them for you. And Carney, even though he's been wounded, he says he would not do it. And so he is not going to give up the colors to anyone who wasn't a member of the 54th Massachusetts. So these two, and I have a feeling that this guy understood that, right? Because he had his own regimental colors to deal with, right? To be proud of. So these guys struggle on. Now I'm thinking like all of a sudden like, wait, this dude probably was as lost as Carney, and they just kind of fight each other and just have to make their way back, right? So they struggle on. He doesn't get far before he gets hit in the head. The dude gets grazed. I hate when they say grazed. He got hit with a 58 caliber round in his head. What does that do? Does that crack your skull at that point?
I don't know what happens, man. But...
Oh my gosh. So these two finally make it out. They stumble to their own lines. Yippee doo-dah, right? He gets there, and he gets taken to the rear, over to the medical personnel, all that other stuff. And that's when you brought out that perfect, the perfect saying, you know, it resonates. It's so fantastic. This guy has been wounded severely. And the only thing he's concerned about is letting everyone know that he did his job. And he doesn't even say he did it well. He just says, I did my job, guys. Like, boys, I did my job. Like, I did what was asked of me. And not realizing he did way more than was asked of him. Way more. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we all got to be honest with ourselves. Like, how many of us would take that responsibility as serious and to the degree that he did? You know, when you look around and see everyone dead, and would your instinct be survival in terms of like, hey, I'm just gonna play dead. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to make it out of this alive. But he was just like, I've got to get this back to where it belongs, and that was just insane.
And well, I was just gonna say that in the end, unlike the movie didn't show this, but they were actually able to capture a small portion of Fort Wagner for a short amount of time. And we talked about the casualties, right? 272 killed from the 54th out of the 600, Colonel Shaw among them. And although the Union forces were completely obliterated, they had their butts handed to them during this battle to trying to lay siege on Fort Wagner. In the end, the Confederates just abandoned it 2 months later. I mean, what a kick in the, you know what I mean? Yeah. Come on now. So I don't know why. I maybe because they just felt like it wasn't. I guess I would wonder why the Confederates 2 months later would say, you know what, forget it. We don't need this. It was once something we needed. Now it's not. I don't know, but still, they were hailed for their bravery. The 54th. They describe it as it was like a pebble dropped into a puddle. The regiment's heroism had a ripple effect, spurring thousands of other black men to join the Union Army. Mm-hmm. So it just, oh my gosh, this was, I really think, man, I really feel like this was the turning of the war. Whether if you're a historian, you could bring it.
Can't tell me what I think.
You can't tell me my opinion.
He eventually would be discharged from complications with all his wounds. October 11th, 1865, he marries a Miss Susanna Williams. They have one child. In 1866, he would go on to become the superintendent of streetlights for New Bedford, Massachusetts, which I don't know what all that involved, but it was probably a pretty complicated job back in that day, walking around and making sure all the street lights worked. Yeah. I don't know.
It's an important title. That's all I got to say.
It sounds really important. And then it sounds like something I'd want to do. You know? He then went to California, but would later return in 1869. So there's some like gaps in this that I really don't know what was going on in his life. I mean, did he just want to go surfing? What did he?
I know it just says that he went to seek fortune, but returned to New Bedford in 18. Like, what is that? I'm not sure what that was. He panning for gold? I don't know.
Are you sure was it Vegas? Did he go to Vegas?
Dude, at that time, I suppose he could have been panning for gold.
Was Vegas? Well, yeah. When was the gold rush? That was 1849.
He must not have struck it rich.
Wait, when was the gold rush? Now I gotta know.
He struck it rich in my heart. That's for sure.
Go. I was like forever Googling on this show.
Yeah, but
Like
this is
it's a constant thing.
well, these are interesting questions because what
They are, like the 19th century, blah blah blah.
blah blah gold, blah blah
I'm trying
California.
rushes of the the 1860s, the
There you
1870s, the
go.
1880s, the 1890s. So I guess there was multiple rushes. So I guess maybe he could have been part of one of the gold rushes.
Well, I wonder too, because it says because of his injuries he was discharged in June 30th of 1864. I wonder what he did. Like, did he work behind the scenes? Did he work in garrison or what?
He was macking on Susanna, man.
I know. Hello, hubba
He
hubba.
he was working his angles.
Working his magic.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, what I was saying was he ultimately comes back home, basically, and he gets a job working for the Postal Service and retired 32 years later.
Woo.
So he works a whole career after sowing his not so royal oats for a while. He comes home and becomes a postal carrier for 32 years. And May 23rd, 1900, he goes to his mailbox and checks the mail, and inside is this little medal, because back then the president, you didn't go to the White House and get the medal put on your neck. There was no fabric attached to it. It was literally just the medallion, like just the medal. And it, I just imagine it like clinking out onto Carney's floor, like, what's this? And then inside is this letter, like, oh, hey, congrats for this issue about 40 years ago.
You did some good stuff back then, man.
I know it's been a while since we chatted. U.S. government here. And
the only thing that would have been worse is we're going to need you to come back.
He's like Jack Ryan. He just gets reactivated. Like William Carney goes
still
back.
Got 2 rounds in him, too. Gosh. And he still
Probably
works 32 years after that. He's got 2 slugs in his body. Good Lord.
I want Tom Clancy to do a William H. Carney book and movie.
I don't know if he could do it justice, to be quite honest.
That'd be pretty sweet. Yeah, so because he's kind of, now we've determined that he's a SEAL-esque and whatever, all the good
he's
good
special
stuff.
ops. It's obvious.
Yeah, spec ops of Civil War. Black Ops, that's where the term came from. Not many people know that.
You guys probably didn't realize
first Black
that.
Medal of Honor recipient, Black Ops. You thought it was a play on words. It wasn't. It was actually the color of the recipient.
You can quote us on that.
Yeah, just don't Google it, or anything like that.
Just take our word for it.
Just take, we're always here to put the facts out.
Yep, that's all we are.
Hard hitting,
just the facts
here from these stories. Anyway, yeah, he retires after he was employed as a messenger for the Massachusetts State House, where he was injured. This is the kicker. He was injured,
just brutal,
in an accident that trapped his leg in an elevator that caused his death on December 8th, 1908, 8 years after he received the Medal of Honor. And he had got this job as a messenger, it was a retirement gig.
Yeah.
It was the retirement. It was his second retirement gig, really. You figured he retired from the military, and then he was a gold rusher, we presume, or a gambler if he was out in Vegas, maybe.
One or the other.
It said California, quotes, but it really meant Vegas. He was on the early Fremont Street trying to hit it rich at Hold'em or something. And then he would swing open the double doors at the saloon. I'm William H. Carney.
A lot of people don't realize that
I've got a .58 caliber in my body. I don't know what he sounded like, but I presume it's like that.
A lot of people don't know that Fremont Street was originally called Carney Street.
Well, that's where the term carnies come from,
right?
From crazy carnivals, So yeah, it's him. We've really gone off the reservation on this story.
We did.
However, let's bring it back. So imagine you retire from the military after that, an ordeal that earns you a Medal of Honor, the craziness that we just went through. Then he goes out and kind of like tries to live his life and have fun doing whatever he's doing out in California, comes back and is, he does the superintendent of streetlights. He does a 32-year postal career. And then he retires from that and gets this messenger job, like a cake retirement gig,
Yep.
whatever was going on, at the Massachusetts State House. And after all that, your leg gets stuck in an elevator
Ugh.
and kills you.
Yeah. And it says that his
That's
body laid in
nuts.
state for a day at the undertaking rooms of the Walden Banks, 142 Lenox Street, at the wish of his wife and daughter. He was buried in the family plot at Oak Grove Cemetery in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and engraved on his tombstone is an image of the Medal of Honor.
Nice.
It's, we laugh and we can giggle and make, we can make light of some of the stuff here, but man, what a career, what a military career, what a dedicated man this guy was to obviously his entire family. He was a workhorse. He was a just an absolute. You can just see it in his eyes. I guarantee he was an absolute gentleman at all times, and it kind of. When we read about him basically saying, boys, basically the flag never touched the ground, you could just like get an idea of the kind of man he is. And again, studied to be a pastor. He learned how to read at like 15. They had to secretly teach him how to read.
Yeah, he was pretty educated. It was that part of his education led to his advancement in the military. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant pretty quickly.
Yeah,
because of his education, because of his skill intellectually.
I'll tell you what, we are so happy to be. I'm happy to be able to tell this story a second time. To be quite honest, this
awesome.
guy is something else. Fantastic, man.
And guys, when we do joke around on here, listen, this is Tales of Valor with a twist, I guess. Like we just kind of want to be ourselves as we tell each other these stories, and sometimes we crack jokes and we go back and forth. It's never meant to be disparaging in any way to
or
the people
disrespectful,
we're talking about,
right?
Or families, at all. We want to honor that. We want to tell these tales, with I guess they deserve to be told,
yeah.
Right. So we want to tell them, but we're just being ourselves. This is like we want people to grab the bourbon and listen to the story.
Yeah, like you're with us. Just kind of hanging out around the table.
We want you guys to be able to pass the story on. Now you can be like, have you ever heard of this crazy story about William Carney? Did you know he was cut out of the freaking movie Glory?
Yeah. Did you know that's what Fremont was named before?
Guys, did you know Fremont Street was originally Carney Street after a Medal of Honor recipient? Yes, please go tell that around the water cooler and let us know how that works out for you. All right, well, man. we already have the next 3 episodes recorded.
Yes.
Now
we're about ready.
We're getting close to release. Yeah, so when you heard this episode, well, listen to the next 3 or listen to the one before this one.
Keep
Whatever,
drinking bourbon.
If this is the first one.
The more you drink bourbon, the better these are going to sound.
The better these stories get. Yes. Yeah. And the more you'll need to listen again to be reminded of what was there in the first place. All right, guys, we will talk to you soon.
Take care.